Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jason Levine, and thank you so much for joining me today on the Friday Masterclass, where today it is an AMA, an Ask Me Anything. Pretty casual. Going to be relying on you, the chat, to drive it. Otherwise, I've actually got a couple things I want to showcase anyway, of course. A couple things in the Premiere Pro beta that would be very interesting to probably all of you if you're editing video. I want to emphasize again, if you're not checking out the Premiere Pro betas, or for that matter, the Photoshop beta in particular, you've seen me show GenFill and some of the new Firefly-driven features in Photoshop here on the stream a couple times in the last few months. You definitely want to be doing that. Anybody has access, everybody who's a Creative Cloud member has access to the betas. You can download them via the Creative Cloud desktop. They get updated almost daily, in particular for Premiere and Photoshop, if not every day, almost every day. And it's also a great way to just see kind of what we're working on, and if you want to just explore and experiment. Don't recommend doing a full project in the beta necessarily, because it's a beta, but play around, have some fun. As always, we're coming to you live across multiple networks, so thank you for joining us on LinkedIn, Twitter, YouTube, Behance, and Facebook. So great to see you. Thank you so much. Welcome. And let's give a couple shouts today. We got Tim, we have Reverb Mike, Umacorn, Gino, Cody Bear. Nice to see you all here. Let's see who's chiming in on this side. Got Robbins Drones. Great to see you from Portland. Nice to see you. Oh, Gino, you're in Brussels, huh? Oh, nice. Okay. Great to see you too. Thank you so much for joining. Stephanie, Corinne, Jean, Jim, Bar. I can't read that one. Man, I've got some new glasses coming in. You know, my prescription didn't change for years, but all of a sudden it's changing because, you know, age. Okay, so I see Tim, who works here, has a question. Thanks for kicking it off, dude. Around audio interfaces. And he's asking, are there any that work particularly well with Audition, Premiere, and is there even a difference? That's a great question, actually. So as mentioned multiple times in here, let me see if I can pull up. I've got a little document here that maybe I can use to share as I'm talking. So yeah, audio interfaces. So this comes up a lot, and the truth is these days, so like now, as far as audio interfaces go, you know, for the most part, they're all pretty good. They're all kind of similar. Basically, what you're paying for are features. So, you know, some will have more inputs. Some will have special DSP maybe built in. Some will come with plugins, VST or AU plugins that you can use, and then, you know, you get some kind of limited license. You know, there's such a variety of them. Oh, this is really, this is pretty old. I just realized this is from Max 2014. I had a doc where I talked about this. Here, let me just pull this up real quickly. It's just worth showing because it just has some images. But so basically, I've talked about this a lot. I'm a big Focusrite fan. I use Focusrite. I've got several Focusrites running here now. Really, as far as Premiere and Audition go, if it's USB, USB-C, I suppose some may be still using FireWire if you're on older machines. They'll all work basically just fine. Now, some of them that have kind of internal signal processing and things, you may not be able to access a lot of that if it's sort of on device. Some of them work directly with apps like Logic and some other things. Maybe some of those you can access if they're not external installers. But ultimately, here, let me see. I'm going to share right now. Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. I have not heard of too many devices that simply don't work. What will often determine sort of your success or how much you like that particular device are going to be the driver support for the particular OS that you're working in. So again, this is 9 years old already, but this was a fairly inexpensive Focusrite Scarlett 8i6. So again, what are you paying for when you're buying an audio interface? So this is external. This was USB 2. Yeah, we're going way back. What are you paying for? Well, one, you're paying for A to D, D to A conversion, right? So that analog to digital converter, how that sound gets into the device, and then what it sounds like coming out. Focusrite, they've been around a long, long time, started, of course, in the analog domain. Really good, very transparent sounding devices. Not to say they don't have a color, they absolutely do. And that's the thing is, while all these devices may work and sound okay, they don't sound the same. So Focusrite sounds different from, say, Avid/Digi hardware, sounds different from, say, PreSonus preamp hardware. They're not all going to sound the same to you via headphones, via speakers. They all have a slightly different color. A lot of that has to do with that A to D, D to A conversion. But aside from that, because for the most part, that doesn't affect how people actually work in the apps, you're largely paying for, inputs and connectivity. So in the case of something like this, you can see here it has basically 4 analog ins. So you have the 2 combo XLR 1/4 inch inputs here. And this is pretty standard on most of your USB devices today, right? So you can use XLR inputs or 1/4 inch inputs directly. Front panel gain with phantom power. So again, if you're using condenser mics, you don't need a separate preamp unless you want one. Almost all of these devices will have phantom power for condenser XLR mics. And then there's 2 additional 1/4 inch line inputs on the back. Now, I have people ask me this all the time. Well, it says, 8i6. I'm only seeing 4 inputs, and I'm only seeing 4 outputs. So what's happening here? Well, it's also considering, so you have SpeedIF, so this is your digital input. So that's 2 more, that's another stereo pair. And then you also technically have your MIDI input as well. And then you have your 4 1/4 inch outputs, your MIDI out, your SpeedIF out, and then you have your headphone out as well, and a monitor. So that's where you're sort of getting the 8i6 from. But ultimately, whatever your cost allows, again, most of them are really pretty good. Way back in the day when it was more, we're going to get to this. Like, what the hell? Yes, I'm in a pool. We'll come back to that in a second. It used to be in sort of the early PC, late 90s, early 2000s, when you had things like Sound Blaster, and I can't remember the name. What was it? Creative something, and was it Turtle Beach? Does anybody remember Turtle Beach? All these like consumer gaming audio cards. I mean, even then, most of them were trash. They were garbage. First of all, they were 16-bit cards, so they weren't meant for digital audio recording or mixing, period. They were meant for really just to play back game audio and to have an 1/8 inch mini jack so that you could input a mic while you were playing. They weren't meant for sort of, quote-unquote high-fidelity sound. By the time you get into the early 2000s, though, where you started seeing just more sort of standard, again, FireWire, USB devices, everything got better. And there's so many. And again, they can go up way, way in price. You've got, certain hardware like UAD, which are really amazing. That's where you're paying for the preamp technology, the analog to digital conversion that they're using. UAD's been around a long, long time. They're very expensive. It's very worth it if you're a total Sonic nerd. Now, as a fellow Sonic nerd, let me also say this. I mean, I'm not going to pay $1,000 for a stereo input device because no one else cares. That's the reality, They're all pretty good. Turtle Beach was your first gaming headset, Cody. Yes, I mean, I had one too. And some of them had like surround sound as well, but largely it was all kind of gimmicky. And they were fine. I mean, they were good for the time. What is up, Stan Arthur? Nice to see you. Richard, how's it going? Okay, so let's see. Richard's saying, don't you agree that Premiere Pro should have the same audio slopes features as Audition? It's so easy to overlay, adjust slopes in Audition and cost so many clicks in Premiere. I assume you mean the auto crossfades. Yeah. And this, I believe, is something that I've seen it on feature lists. So, and I think we've actually shown some of this in sort of future of video presentations where you see I'm assuming that's what you're talking about, is the non-destructive crossfades. Yeah, Premiere needs that. The fact that you have to draw them, or even, just set points and then enable Bezier so that you have smooth curves. It's fine. It's a fine workflow. It does seem a little on the old school side, I admit. So yeah, I'm totally with you there. All right, let's see. And here I was going to just show that for people who are curious. Let me see if I can open up a session here. Do we have any sessions? Let's do this one. See, before I share my screen, let's just see if this is okay. Yeah, this is good enough to show it. Okay, so let me go back to my screen here. So what Richard was talking about is, and I show this all the time, and this is, again, one of the really great jobs of UI that the Audition team has done. So, if you want to crossfade things, you can still manually draw curves, but by default, when you cross over, two audio clips, you'll see that the crossfade gets drawn automatically. And then you have control, visual control, non-destructively, to adjust, the fade in, fade out curve, i.e. intensity, or also make it log or linear. And then, let's see if you hover over this. Yeah, so you'll see, so Option, if you hold down Option, that's going to give you symmetric fades. You'll see how that works. This is very small here, so it's kind of hard to see the symmetric fade happening. That'll give you symmetrical fades, which is nice if you hold down Option. Oh, there you go. That's nice. So you have a couple of keyboard shortcut modifiers here. What's the other one? Command to change the fade shape. So, again, you can get... In the old Pro Tools, you used to have custom shapes, which, to be honest, they're pretty awesome. You'd think, well, wouldn't you want to sort of customize yourself? It can get a little confusing, but this works just as well to do that. And then what's the third one? Shift key to either... What does that say? To fade duration or shape. Oh, I see. Okay. Yeah, so fixed. The shape stays the same, but you just adjust duration. Yeah. So a couple nice keyboard shortcut modifiers. Again, you can always, of course, adjust the in and out after the fact. But Premiere should work this way. We should have this. This is just really good implementation here. Great user experience. And I agree with you 100% that Premiere totally could benefit from that. Okay, let's see what else we got here. Why does AE flip through all of my timelines and reset them every time I switch workspaces? Oh, interesting. So are you saying the comps that you have open in the timeline, when you switch workspaces, some disappear? Yeah, this is a problem that I've seen in Premiere as well. I wasn't aware that was actually happening in After Effects at present. In fact, here, I'm willing to open it up and take a look for myself. But it's obviously a bug that should not be happening. Again, I've seen it occur in Premiere. It's a drag. And what we're talking about is that in Premiere, so you're in a workspace, you have, say, 4 tabs open in a particular order, and then you switch to the mixing workspace or something else, and suddenly not only are your tabs not open, but you may not have no tabs open, or you'll have one of the 4 or something. Yeah, that shouldn't be doing that. So definitely let me, if you want to ping me, I gotta check into that, Mike. I'm opening up After Effects as we speak, by the way. So that would be something to, because I wasn't aware that was happening there. Okay. Stan Arthur, do you know if quantize audio is on the list of coming attractions for Audition? Stan, you hit me right in the heart there. It's not really your fault. Short answer, no. No, because more than likely we are not adding any MIDI functionality to Audition anytime soon, which is a drag and a loss, because I would love for that to be the case, but I don't think it's in the cards. I'd love it to be. You know, that's one of the most common requests we get, which is why, you know, to have Audition be a full-fledged DAW. And honestly, the only thing it's really missing is the sort of MIDI VSTI component, as you all know. That's why I still record everything manually, because I can't use MIDI here. Not that I necessarily would anyway. In truth, I haven't used MIDI in earnest for any production I've done since the late 80s. Maybe a few times in the 90s. But especially after graduating at Berkeley, I was like, man, I can play to a click. I don't need to quantize anything. So very, very musician-like in that regard. Snob. No, but I sure wish we had it, Stan. You know, you'll be the first to know if it happens there. Mohammed Reza, what's happening? Okay. Richard Del Conner is asking, how do I raise the RMS value in Adobe Audition while lowering or maintaining the noise floor below 60 dB? What is a workflow to include normalizing compression, no NR? I'm not exactly sure what you mean to include normalizing compression. As far as raising RMS, so here, if we just take this little clip here, let me switch over real quick. So, oh, sorry, wrong screen. So, first of all, just to come back to a standard here. So when we're talking about RMS, for those who are uninitiated audio nerds, that stands for root mean squared. What we're talking about is a traditional legacy loudness measurement, average loudness measurement that's measured in decibels relative to full scale, as opposed to today, where most productions, whether for audio specifically or audio for video, we use kind of this this newer LUFS scale, which is loudness units relative to full scale. And when we talk specifically in the US, we're sort of measuring against this ITU standard. So one of the things you can do, of course, is via amplitude statistics, is you can scan and you can then see your RMS values. Again, these are going to be your averages. Now, typically, you know, if you look at sort of loudness units, in which case this particular track is coming up at around -20. Max RMS here is averaging around -16. You can see the minimum RMS is right around -60 dB. It's also telling us our dynamic range here, which is pretty minimal. To increase RMS, you're going to use some kind of compression or limiting. I mean, so if you're trying to increase RMS, and how do you measure that dynamically? We don't really have an effect that'll measure that. Now, let's see. If we go into, where is it now? Is it special? So if we go into our loudness meter, this one, I can't remember if this even does. Does this do RMS? No, it only does LUFS. Yeah, so this is a new loudness meter. I don't know if anybody's seen this. Just playing a couple seconds here. So again, this is all measuring real-time LUFS. Yeah, this doesn't even have RMS. Let me see if here, let me grab something. I'm gonna grab another. Let me grab a different audio track. Bear with me here for one sec. This is some of that stuff that I was doing for Roger Nichols' family, so I'm not going to play Donald Fagen on here as much as I'd like to. Let me just grab another file. Okay, I'll grab one of our podcast files. All right. So the short answer, as mentioned, is you're going to, you would use compression and or limiting to increase the loudness there. I mean, that is the answer. Now, lots of different ways you could do that. Why can't I find any audio files? For heaven's sake. Can I get something? that's not commercial. Here. Okay, this is fine. Use this. A little mono drum test here. Just scan this out. So let's go into special again. Loudness radar. So this is our this is the TC Electronic loudness radar meter that we also use here. I don't think this will measure real-time RMS either. It does not. It does not. Yeah. So I don't know exactly. Maybe you can clarify for me if you're looking to be able to monitor that change in real time. The nice thing about all of these is that you can, in fact, monitor how you're affecting loudness over time in real time as you're making those adjustments. Here, unfortunately, I guess the other thing you could do, in theory, is again, this is not. It's not an exact science here, but you know, if you right-click on your level meter, you can have it show valleys. So using dynamic peaks. So this will kind of show you some real-time averages. So let's see, this is, again, this is just like a mono drum test here. Okay, so if we're looking at this, I don't know if you can see the the valley line, so it's giving you the average. It looked like it was, you know, somewhere between minus 12 and minus 20-ish. Again, not an exact science here. So again, if we were to sort of look at, so that's just me eyeballing it. And in this case, yeah, maximum RMS was around minus 11, total minus 27, minimum minus. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for. Unfortunately, yeah, we don't have a way to. Now there's a bunch of plugins because in radio and broadcast they're still often measuring. You know, there's lots of different scales. So a couple of plugins can give you all those different real-time measurements. Here, it's a one-time sort of quote unquote, you know, a processed, not destructive, but a processed value based on the entire duration. This is today the only way in Audition that we can effectively measure RMS, which again is kind of a legacy value. So if you're talking to people who are producing stuff again for, say, Spotify or for Netflix or, you know, even for YouTube, everyone's more concerned with LUFS these days. Love it, hate it, whatever. I can't honestly say, outside of talking to people in radio, that I hear RMS ever come up. So kudos. We know when you and I came about in the industry. Okay. Vashi. Hey, what's up, Vashi? Vashi Nedemansky. Had Vashi here on the stream many, many times. You will all know him. Incredible filmmaker, editor, director. Working on his current documentary, Big Ned. Vashi Nedemansky. Check out his site. He's got also tons of free content, tons of tutorials. You've seen him all over our channels. Vashi's asking, what's your favorite way to create ringouts in Premiere or Audition? I still send clips from Premiere to Audition and add silence to end of the clip plus effect, then save. Yeah, that's kind of how I do it too. I'm doing less of that these days, but that's still sort of my method. Maybe the only difference is that I'll often just send the entire sequence and assemble that way. And then render back to Premiere, so it's all sort of it's already there and it's already back in Premiere's timeline in the multitrack, synchronized against the original clips, because now you have generated stems. So that's maybe the only difference for me, but that is the way I do it. Okay, looking at LinkedIn here. When will Essential Audio panels support audio ducking based on conflicting frequency ranges, not merely volume? Think of it like the outside the club effect, where you duck the high and mid ranges to make more space for human voice. So in that case, Richard, that is true sidechain ducking, but that would be sidechain ducking via EQ, right? So you're ducking 2K to 5K, in this, as opposed to a volume based. Really excellent, excellent feature request. I'll need to look into that. I want to say I think that's been requested. I know I certainly have requested to have true side chaining, right? So that you could side chain a compressor for the purpose of ducking. You could side chain an EQ for the purpose of frequency-based cutouts and effectively ducking. We just need robust. Now you can do this in Audition, right? So with Audition and some third-party EQs, you can do just that. You can also do via our dynamics processor. Now again, I've talked about this at length, and Richard, I trust, known you a long time. And I won't unfortunately see you at IBC because I no longer do those shows, but I hope you enjoy it this year. You'll see my colleague, hopefully Esteban, there. But not exactly the same, but in conjunction, because you can use the dynamics processor as a standalone ducking compressor via side chaining in Audition. And by the way, for those joining the stream, I just did a live stream on how to create a sidechain duck with compression just a few weeks ago. So if you look on my YouTube channel, Jason Levine Video, it's there. I think it's even chapterized. It's easy to follow along. But one of the things that this particular dynamics processor has is frequency band limiting compression. So if, for instance, you want to compress only the vocal range of something, or again, maybe you're trying to compress cymbals and it's a really particular ring in a specific area. So you're effectively doing kind of multi-band by choosing what bands it's affecting. You can do that here. So this is sort of one of those little unknowns. Most people never even go into this tab. As I've mentioned, I love the sound of this dynamics processor. It's just the worst though for actually using practically. First of all, I hate graph-based compression. Despise. Second of all, it's missing a few standard controls. Third of all, nobody understands level detector versus gain processor, but that's because this UI was done 20 plus years ago by non-musicians, by non-audio engineers. It's amazing. It sounds great. There's some really good presets, many of which I authored years ago to get you started. It's just very confusing to use, and it's non-standard. We thankfully now do have a gain reduction meter, and you do see, sort of real-time, you do get real-time sort of feedback in here these days, which is nice. And again, you can kind of set multiple points here, and then you can, again, increase things like input gain and create really nice kind of pumping and breathing effects. Okay. It sounds awesome. It's just a little confusing to set for most people. But anyway, so to answer your question, yes, we need frequency-based ducking. We don't have it yet. I will look into it, Richard, to see if that's a feature request. If not, we should add that to, we should put that up in the forums. But I will, maybe I'll start a Reddit about that too. That's a really great one. Okay. All right. Oh, I see. Richard Del Connor saying, okay, regarding RMS, I have a tedious workflow of manually lowering down largest peaks so I can normalize it overall to a higher value, then limiting it, then compressing it, then hopefully not needing denoise. Yeah, I mean, look, not knowing, okay, when I submit my files to Audible audiobooks, they give me the RMS readings of my files and whether I am within the margins. What's up, Simpsy? Yeah, so the thing is, so specifically with regard to that, okay, so this makes sense. So first of all, and I don't want to derail too much here. And this is a good example. Now, this is just a drum file here, but this is a good example of, so let's assume you're talking Audible, so maybe it's an audio book, right? So I don't know when you say you're tamping down peaks if you're coming in and sort of manually, adjusting gain of peaks. So you say you want every peak at minus, if they're all roughly around -9, you drag them to -9, and then you can normalize to -0.1, right, to get everything so you have the most headroom available. I am assuming you're not doing that. That is where you would use sort of, stage 1 compression to tame all of the out-of-bound peaks to keep things fairly consistent, right? So this is where, again, using something like, a more traditional, it's not my favorite sonically, but it's a good one in terms of just real-time metering, something like, this tube modeled compressor. So, if I were just to take a quick look here, so let's say we're going to do 4-to-1 for drums. Faster release. All right, I'm not giving it any additional gain here. And, we're not doing aggressive compression here. Basically hovering in the -4 to -7 or 8 range. So remember, what that means is, for every 4 decibels above the threshold, it's 1 at the output. So if it's 8 decibels above the threshold, it's 2 decibels at the output. So, this is where I would use something like this to kind of even out those peaks. Now, again, I may need a slightly faster attack because it didn't capture some of these little transients, but now everything is roughly, -7. So this gives me, 6 point something decibels approximately, and this 5.5 of headroom to increase. But so I would use that first stage compression. Again, I didn't want to, if you're wanting to, it's easier to slam those peaks with a voice versus drums, where I'm trying to preserve a little bit of dynamics here. Done very quickly. But I would do that, and then, yes, normalize. Now, limiting, sure, if you're just trying to make things overall more loud, and if you use a brick wall limiter, that'll allow you to create a ceiling, let's say, 1 decibel below 0, to really push things forward. But yes, that could in turn amplify, room ambience or room tone or noise that you don't want. You need to be careful about that, but a lot of that has to do with how it's captured as well, right? If the capture is bad, then you're going to have to denoise. So cleanest capture possible, yes, that matters. Ultimately, if you have a clean capture, you shouldn't really have to worry about noise post-compression unless there was something, unnecessarily lingering in the background. All that said, the Match Loudness panel is a great way to deliver content for podcasts. And the reason I say that is, so let's take this file and drag this in here. So this again, now this is using similar to amplitude statistics when you drop a file in here. So it does in fact give you your ITU standard, your total RMS, loudness and perceived. Okay, so these are the classic RMS values, okay? So classic loudness, classic perceived. These are both RMS figures. Peak is related to dBFS, classic scale, right? True peak is directly related to the loudness unit scale. What you can do here is, now I don't know about Audible, but I'm assuming it's similar to Apple Podcast and Spotify. They have a delivery requirement of -16 LUFS. Now again, maybe Audible's different. I know for a fact Spotify and Apple Music want it measured in LUFS. So, and -16 is kind of the podcast standard for that, with a max true peak of -1. So you can set that here and run it, okay? And what that's going to do by default, now I didn't add any limiting, it's automatically adding a limiter as needed, okay? And you'll see what it ultimately did to those peaks, right? And now if I scan this, go into amplitude statistics here, okay? We should have something that's within that -16. Now this is again a little bit different here, but and you can see again your RMS value is it's never going to be the same as your LUFS value. But as you look at your perceived loudness here, this kind of gives you a better idea in terms of range about how similar, sort of where the relationship lies between LUFS and RMS. This might be something for you to consider without going through so many additional stages. Now, this is adding some limiting, so ultimately you still may run into noise potentially if you have noise in that original source. I would probably say if the noise is not bad, you want to typically tackle that noise up front and make sure that if you process that you don't have any artifacts. Okay. All right. What's up, Anthony? What's up, Theo? 150. A lot of Audition questions today. Wow. Gino, why? Oh, sorry. 150 Metri. Why is there no new major developments for Audition? Good question. Although I did see that this week we just did release some bug fixes and some other things, so that is good news. But yes, Audition is it's in need of some feature love. I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. All right. That said, let's talk real briefly about podcasts, because I just want to show you something real quick. Okay. Oh, I see, Stan. You're talking about processing pre-recorded audio. I've seen it in other DAWs as a way to improve kick and snare. Yes. Yeah. But the concept is the same, right? So yes. Sorry, I assumed you meant quantized with regard to MIDI. So you're talking about like what Logic has, where, or I think Ableton has that, where yes, you can take a real-time drum performance and it will do real-time quantization. Let me rephrase that. It'll do quantization of non-MIDI based audio. Yes. I could see something like that coming, because now I would imagine via AI, that's probably pretty easy. No ETA on such a thing. I'd love to see that, actually. That would be cool. Again, for me, personally, I wouldn't use it in that way because snobbery. No, but I have used it on other people's productions in Ableton, I believe. It's great. So yes, thanks for the clarification. Yeah, I would love to see that. Okay. Robert Holly, what is up, dude? Yes, perceived and RMS. Perceived, the default minus 23 LUFS. EBU standard will produce audio that is approximately 25% of full scale. Yeah, and again, though, it depends based on what your maximum dBTP, decibels true peak level, is set to. There's several variables involved there, and also based on what standard. European broadcast standard is different from the US one, is slightly different from the Canadian one, slightly different from the Japanese one, although they're all within a decibel or two of each other. But again, based on where you're going with that, like I said, almost everything today is measured in LUFS. It's nice to have RMS. I've not seen anyone. It's nice to see someone requesting it. That's why we still show it. In any case, okay. Podcast. So, talked about enhanced speech before, and I just wanted to show you that we've made some updates to this. So this is why I have this. So again, for those of you who've not heard it, Adobe Podcast Enhance is some new technology that we have, AI-based, that does just amazing things to clean up your audio. I've shown this a couple of times. It is truly amazing, and it's constantly being updated and changed, all right, and improved. It is also, at some point soon, again, download the Premiere Beta, it will be coming to Premiere. I can't give you an ETA. It will be coming, though. And this was based on user requests, largely on the Reddits, but everywhere people want this functionality in Premiere. So let me just play the original here for you. And I did this just as a test a week or two ago. So this is me. Well, yeah, I'll just play it for you. It'll speak for itself. Okay, so this is a test to see how well Enhance does with extreme background noise, keeping in mind that I'm trying to talk right into the camera, but we've got a waterfall behind us and it's super noisy. Okay, now the audio itself is clear, so that's not an issue. Problem is that it's just like overtaken by the waterfall noise, right? So this is kind of an extreme example, and I was curious to see what it would do. Now, partly why I wanted to try this is because of one of the new additions that we've added to Podcast Enhance. I'm hoping that I'll see it when I upload the file. So what I did here was I just extracted the audio from this separately. So here's just the audio of that video. Okay, so this is a test to see how well. Okay, so just, and this, by the way, this is all on the phone, of course. So if we bounce over to this, let's go ahead and import that. So that's called Pool Waterfall. All right, open this. It's going to enhance it, and then assuming maybe I need to clear my cache. I'm hoping I'm going to see. We just added an intensity slider. So what's really cool about that, and this is something which people have been asking for since we started offering this podcast Enhance online, it's the ability to effectively dial back some of the original sound, which may include noise or ambient sound or room tone. And so basically like a wet-dry balance of the effect. Aha, there it is. So what's really cool about this is, again, you have the ability to retain or dial back some of that ambient sound. So just real quick, we're going to process a new one. So I did one. This was at 90%. So here is the result that I had already. And we're going to try one with a little bit less. And I'll see if I didn't try if we could preview it in there with the change too. So we'll check that out. But here it is processed with 90% removal. So what that's doing, again, is it's leaving a little bit of the waterfall element there, because it would probably be very strange and it would feel like ADR if you didn't hear some water, right? I mean, it would, well, you would think, okay, well, obviously he overdubbed that because I'm not hearing any waterfall. So here is the result directly from podcast at 90%. Check it out.
Okay, so this is a test to see how well Enhance does with extreme background noise, keeping in mind that I'm trying to talk right into the camera.
And let's turn the original on again.
But we've got a waterfall behind us, and it's super noisy. Let's see. Let's see how it does.
Right?
Okay, this is an example. This is a test to see how well Enhance does with extreme background noise.
Now, one of the things that I've talked to the team about is that, of course, this is, so you might think, wow, that's amazing. Or you might think, wow, that's cool. Or you might think, wow, that sounds terrible, because it sounds like you're on a Shure SM7B while in a pool, and you're not. So your brain and your eyes can't resolve those two things, and bleh. So correct. So it is modeling after a sort of podcast sort of sound, which in that environment may seem a little odd. So this is where perhaps using some of the strength or the intensity can maybe, smooth over some of those edges. So that was at 90%. It's also worth pointing out, just for transparency here, I did add a little bit of EQ to bump up some of the sort of mids and upper mids around 8K, just to give a little more little shimmer quality here, kind of a wide Q value. I also dipped down some of the lower mids, 130. Again, this is kind of a fundamental, an octave fundamental for male voices, but that's where you're going to get a lot of that octave fundamental, again, for podcast, right? That's where you get that warmth. The octave of this below would be approximately 61 hertz, right? That's the fundamental bass note. So didn't need so much of that. Also very narrow Q value, so I popped a little bit of that out of there. And I did also add just a little bit of ambience because it was too dry. It sounded a little too dry. So very small room size, using about 9% of just a sort of affected signal here. But let's try this at 50%. And I'm curious if I can preview it with that. So let's see.
Okay.
Oh, and it's going through those speakers.
So this is a test to see how well Enhance does with extreme background noise, keeping in mind
it is real time. Okay, sorry, it's going through my, I'm not going to change all that right now. It's going through my Mac's speakers here. But note what I was doing as you're playing. This does actually work in real time.
That I'm trying to talk right into the camera, but we've got a waterfall behind us, and it's super noisy.
All right, so let's try like 66%. Let's download that. So you saw that it took, just a few seconds, 20 seconds to process. We then have real-time adjustment while you're playing back. I know it was sort of stuttering. That's fine. It's still working in real time. The download is instantaneous. So if we come back to Premiere here, let me just just change my screen real quick. All right. Pool Waterfall Enhanced 1. So here's the one we just did. So you can see that. Okay. Import. And let's drop this into a new track. Let's take a listen.
Okay, so this is a test to see how well Enhance does with extreme background noise.
All right, so that's the new one. Here's the previous one that I did at 90%.
Okay, so this is a test to see how well Enhance does with extreme background noise. Keeping in mind that I'm trying to talk right into the camera, but we've got a waterfall behind us.
That's my face of, wow, that's actually pretty significant. Really good. So I'd even go to 70, you know? Now you might be thinking, okay, that's cool, but I gotta process it and then downloads. That means I'd have to do a 70% and then come back to Premiere and what a drag and blah, blah, blah. Well, ultimately, if this makes it into Premiere, that slider is gonna be in there too. You will be able to do it in real time and 90% chance that's going to appear inside of Essential Sound. So it'll be real time. That's pretty awesome. So that's really exciting. So again, if you haven't already checked it out, podcast.adobe.com, Enhance Speech. It's amazing. It is particularly good with on-axis audio. So even if you're like talking into your camera, DSLR, Red, whatever it is, crummy camera mic, but you're on axis, but it's echoey or it's noisy or whatever, you're far away, it does shocking restorations, shockingly good, sincerely, okay? Okay, question from YouTube, Cody Bear. How do you delete a part of a video, i.e. at the end, if I don't want it in the footage? So you're just talking about basic cut and delete here. I mean, number of different ways to do it. As always, there are keyboard shortcuts for everything. I typically don't use them or like to showcase them because I forget them myself, but obviously the simplest way is to use your razor tool. So if you're just talking about literally cutting something out, razor tool, shortcut key C, okay? You just scrub to whatever frame you want to apply that cut it. Now here, because I have unlinked audio with that video as well, I can just cut across all three. Shortcut key V, right? So that's my move tool. Now I can move all this out. I can extract it. Or I can simply, cut it or clear it. All right. Now, also, if I wanted to cut something in the middle, right? So you wanted to do like a ripple. Again, I'm doing this all with the tool. Normally I would do shortcuts, but those are too hard to follow. I can select this little section here, this little silent section, right click, control click. And now if I do a ripple delete, that middle part's gonna go away and the two side parts will snap together. There that is, okay? Really basic chop stuff here. And then of course, if you want, you can crossfade, you could add a blend mode. There's lots of different things that you can do there. Reverb mic. I just keep a layer of the original to mix with the enhanced layer. Yeah, and that's effectively the same thing. Now the only difference with that's what I'd been doing before we added that slider, is you do now when it is processed through enhanced speech, it definitely, right, positively, but it colors. I almost said colorizes. It colors the sound. So you may have, my only caveat with using the original and the enhanced manually and adjusting levels is that you may have some frequencies that are fighting one another, particularly because the enhanced version enhances things primarily in the low to low mid range, like 60, 100, 120, even 240 to some degree. So you may have some conflict there that you would have to tackle independently. That's not for you, Mike, that's for others. But I mean, you may have it too, but you know how to account for that. So just keep that in mind if you're doing that manually. That's a perfectly adequate workflow, one I've implemented myself. But that's the thing, is you can have sort of frequency clash in doing that. And that enhanced slider, once it's implemented in the app, will hopefully take care of that. Enhance sometimes takes out the S. Yeah, it can do, and I've reported this too, it can do weird things. It can make things sibilant, or it can squash the attack of a S sound, which is not wanted. So again, it's not entirely perfect. But that's, again, one of those things that I've found that even backing off, if you're finding that that's happening, backing off a few percent. So instead of processing at what would have been 100 before, you had no choice, do it at 95 or 92. It actually restores some of that, if it's not terribly frequent. You can also pre-treat a file carefully for sibilance in advance of applying enhanced speech, which also helps preserve S's without incurring additional sibilance and those sort of artifacts. Okay. All right. What's your favorite approach to mixing dialogue and music together without ducking to get an even, legible audio blend? Yeah, I mean, that's all about the compressor. And to be honest, that's a great question, Vashi. So we're talking about mixing, dialogue, music, and things without doing the duck. Obviously, you can have some standard frequency-based cutouts using parametric equalizers, either at a clip level if necessary. I don't typically do that. In general, I will often not create a scoop out for music, but I'll attenuate certain things in the middle, especially if it's a more sort of a busier commercial track versus just underscore where melodic elements won't necessarily fill the mid-range. But you want to use something like to really glue them together and still have the sense of dynamics between the two without ducking. I highly recommend the Waves LA2A compressor, or something like which is, this is an emulation of a classic analog compressor, or something like the Uri 1176. Tube and or opto-based compressors are going to give you that very smooth, dynamically glued together kind of sound. A lot of that also has to do with the ratio. Again, what you're seeing now is a lot of just overly compressed content. Now that's going to glue everything together easily. The problem is that it sucks away all dynamics. I've said this many times, and Vashi, I know we've talked about this. You see a lot of modern movies where, the screaming, is as loud as the, "they're coming for you" whisper. And I guess there's a certain element of being able to keep you in the moment when it's like that, because the sound, the level really never dies, so you're always constantly engaged. That said, and I talked about this several months ago, I took my youngest to go see Rocky, a new 4K print of Rocky, where admittedly, while the visual was beautifully restored, the sound, it may have been restored, but it really, it sounded like a one mic Nagra recording. It was pretty rough. And the sound design was pretty rough. Hey, it's 1976. But what I right away noticed, seeing an older film in a theater, in a Dolby theater, no less, and what even my young son noticed was that when there were quieter parts, and there's moments where Rocky's talking to Adrian and there's sort of, they're whispering, the dialogue was noticeably quieter than when they were, shouting or whatever. And it was such a welcome change. So typically what I'll say is, regardless of whether you use analog or opto compression, having longer release times for one allows things to, again, stay glued when necessary. And then as the fader writing, that's the other thing too, right, Vashi, is that if you're not going to duck, you have to have a certain amount of riding the fader, which is ducking effectively, but it's not to necessarily pull things out of range. It's just to rebalance for effect and to preserve some dynamic movement. You don't have to do it, Again, compression can kind of do it for you. Throw a brick wall limiter on top of that, and that'll, again, continue to push everything forward. But I use that way more. I mean, that's the funny thing is I almost never use ducking, ever. It's always compression based, or again, little EQ tricks, or just slight fader moves. I mean, that's the thing. If you're not squashing everything to death, and by the way, and your dialogue in advance should be compressed to be fairly consistent overall. Now, if you're limiting it because you want those whispers to be as loud or as present as regular volume dialogue, that's a choice you can make. But as long as you have the dialogue already pre-treated, where you just, you don't have 15 decibels of dynamic range, you shouldn't have to, you wouldn't have to do all that much going sort of the riding fader compression way. I mean, I know you know all this, dude. Okay. A lot of audio today. Charles Denham, I have an audio question. There are 2 gain levels. Oh my God, we're almost out of time. Sorry, Charles, I'm going to have to answer you offline because we're out of time. How did this happen? This is what happens, friends, when we're having fun. All right, well, on that note, I hope everyone has a great weekend. Take care. Charles, I'm going to stay on so I can answer your question. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world, and we'll see you again next time. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.